Welcome to Meditations, a Stoic podcast, a 12-episode limited series exploring the writing of Marcus Aurelius. Through this work, we will examine the philosophy of Stoicism, how it applied to the life of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and how it applies to our own lives today. And here we are. So we're going to discuss chapter 2, or book 2, rather, I guess, of Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. No one I would rather do that with than this man right here, Devin Kivioya. So let's get into it, man. Probably the best background for this episode would be to talk a little bit about, I guess, how spirituality was viewed, in Marcus Aurelius's time. And yeah, I guess that would start with some of the Greco-Roman religion, right?
Definitely started in Greco-Roman religion, which in large part was co-opted by the Romans. In Greek times, especially, the gods were thought of as physically existing somewhere. On top of a mountain, actually living and doing things. As time went on, and kind of the idea of kind of another realm that wasn't this one kind of started to form, the idea that they didn't so much physically exist kind of came to be more so for Romans than for Greeks. But at first the Romans believed the same thing, that they lived on a mountain somewhere and existed in the real world.
Yeah, and to an extent, I guess the Greeks literally believed in their gods, and to would you say a lesser extent, the Romans truly believed in the Greek gods?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They a lot of them observed their religion ritualistically, because they really did believe that if they didn't do the things they were supposed to, that a god somewhere was either going to throw a lightning bolt at them or come down and kick the crap out of them.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about the Greek gods in general and just kind of some of their traits and stuff like that?
Sure. The Greek gods were descended from two previous generations of Greek gods. The one that most people are familiar with would be the Titans. And then the generation that came before that, they were called, I think, primordial gods. And they were all literally descended from each other. The group that everybody is familiar with, the third generation, the 12 gods would be Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Aphrodite, Artemis, Apollo, Hermes, Hephaestus, Demeter, Athena, Dionysus, Hestia, and Hades. This pantheon included lightning god, a fire god, 2 or 3 war gods, a sun god, and a god of the underworld. A lot of the more common things you see in pantheons.
Yeah, what's a pantheon without 2 or 3 war gods, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they should all be war gods. I mean, if you try hard enough and believe in yourself, all gods are war gods.
I guess every god has an inner war god, I suppose. I get we could go through all of these. I mean, that would be the whole podcast. So let's not do that. I am just gonna ask you some. You can tell me. I think everyone knows Poseidon from Aquaman movies or something. Yeah, Apollo. We've heard of those. Is it? How do you say this one? Demeter.
Demeter, yeah. Demeter is, I believe she's the Greek goddess of the harvest and of fertility. Okay,
all right. I'm not sure how that relates to a vampire movie that I recently watched, but I'm sure it does somehow.
Oh, is that the one on Crave, the last
voyage of the Demeter?
Yeah.
It's worthwhile. It's got vampires. But,
is it okay?
Yeah, that's not what this podcast is about.
No. If I have a personal favorite, then yeah, it's probably Dionysus.
which is the god of parties and good times.
God of wine and parties and good times.
Nice, all right. God of wine.
Yeah.
I like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. So, the Romans obviously believed in the Greek gods. They also believed in, kind of like what Stoic philosophers were teaching and what, ancient Greek philosophers were teaching, which isn't necessarily like incompatible with like the pantheon of gods, but it is like its own way of looking at it, right? Like if you really look into Plato's philosophy and like the Stoic philosophy in general, that it suggests like one transcendent deity, right? Like one kind of like over God from which like all the other gods get their godliness or something like that, right? And I think that we should also talk a little bit about the emergence of Christianity. Like that's something where I want to get your opinion on that and kind of like your explanation of what was going on with Christianity and that, and how that was playing a role in like the overall like Roman religion.
Christianity had been slowly on the rise, obviously, since Jesus. And it was most popular at first, especially among the lower classes. It was extremely appealing to slaves, much more appealing than a lot of these other philosophies and religions, because of the idea that this life doesn't matter and that you would be rewarded in the next one. That was highly appealing to people in the lower classes, not so appealing to the upper classes. But over time, it ended up becoming kind of a vogue sort of fashion statement among the Roman upper classes, and they started to slowly convert over to Christianity. This was pretty incompatible with the more traditional Roman character. Christianity was not overly favorable to slavery, and nor did it make people overly favorable to going to war. One of the reasons it did become popular in the upper classes is because the ideas of forgiveness were very appealing to people who had gone to war. So it slowly over time started to replace the original pantheon. And over time, adherence to that original pantheon had gone from a more reverent kind of religion to a more observed superstition than anything. It had really lost its power slowly over time. And so once Christianity came along, the whole empire was pretty ripe for the picking as time went on.
Yeah, and of course the thing about the emperor like literally being a deity, right? And if like some of the population starts to not believe that, like that's going to create problems, I guess, not only with the religion but with like the political situation as well. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, it stirred things up in like two directions, because it created people who didn't see the emperor as divine, and it also created a group of people who the more traditional power classes didn't like and started to persecute. Over time, you see increasing persecution of Christians, depending on who the emperor is, hugely. It could range from secret police and executions to kind of more simple forms of persecution, like economic and disenfranchisement and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like a dissolution of the social order, like because of Christianity in a way, right?
Absolutely, yeah. At this time in history, Christianity is a revolutionary force.
Okay.
Probably either a sign of the beginning of the end of the empire, or partially a symptom of it, and it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah. And I think something else to point out is like in terms of that whole thing of like the ruling class and like what does the ruling class believe in terms of religion. I think like at this time, maybe like, and maybe you'll question this, but I think that like the rulers literally believed in the gods, and like they literally believed in what philosophers were teaching. Like again, when we read this like Marcus Aurelius stuff, right? You see it wasn't supposed to be published. It was just like his own personal thoughts. I think that you do find like a true belief in like morality, religion, whatever, right?
In general, I think that that's true throughout most of history.
Let's get into Book 2 on the River Grand among the Quadi. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Can you explain that title to me, Devin?
Yeah, let's start with setting. The River Gran is today called the River Hron, Hron. It's in what we would consider to be Slovakia, and it flows into the Danube. And the Danube, for at least 50 or 60 years at this point, has been one of the northern frontiers for Rome. It's constantly manned by legions, I think 2 of them, and it's kind of a place where the Romans and the Germanic tribes are kind of sitting on either side of the river, looking back and forth at each other, and kind of watching and waiting. And the Quadi were a Germanic tribe who formed part of a confederation with the Marcomanni, who the Marcomannic Wars are named after. They're part of an uprising which is going to form a large part of the narrative for a very long period of Marcus Aurelius' life.
And people think that he wrote basically this chapter of the book after like being part of military campaigns there and stuff like that.
So yeah, I was trying to look today into specifically when Meditations was written. And the long and short of what I could come up with is that nobody's 100% sure. But the general consensus is that it was written on the later end of his campaigns with the Marcomanni, around 169 or 170.
So after reading the chapter, like, what do you think is going on here? Why do you think that this chapter was written after that experience?
As I did the reading for this chapter and did a little bit of listening, a narrative started to form in my head, a little bit of a picture, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I see, okay? And so, in 165, one of his children dies, a twin named Titus. In 169, his co-emperor Lucius Verus dies. This is somebody who was extremely close to him. When Verus became co-emperor, he took Marcus Aurelius's last name, which Marcus Aurelius discarded as emperor. Marcus Aurelius named one of his sons after Lucius Verus's original last name. These men were extremely close. They grew up together. This was very difficult for Marcus Aurelius. And in 175 or 176, his wife Faustina dies. By the time we reach 179, he's been on the Danube for 9, 10, 11 years. And so I think what we're seeing here is a mix of dealing with grief and accepting this very, very difficult fate that he's going to spend the rest of his life here in legionary camps in the mud on this damn river in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. And then this is what he writes. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Probably the best way to go through this is point by point, like quote by quote. There's some very resonant quotes in here, and some that I think are going to be like really really enlightening to unpack, right? So start from the top, I guess. The first line in this
chapter. Want me to do it?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Say to yourself in the early morning, I shall meet today inquisitive, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, uncharitable men. All these things have come upon them through ignorance of real good and ill. But I, because I have seen the nature of good is the right, and of ill the wrong, and that the nature of the man himself who does wrong is akin to my own, not of the same blood and seed, but partaking with me in mind that is in a portion of divinity, I can neither be harmed by any of them, for no man will involve in me wrong, nor can I be angry with my kinsman or hate him. For we have come into the world to work together like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against one another, therefore, is to oppose nature, and to be vexed with another to turn away, or vexed with another or turn away from him is to tend to antagonism.
Yeah, that's quite an opening paragraph.
Yeah, the first thought in my head is that there was a hell of a run-on sentence there.
Well, yeah, but all of it is very, very instructive and touches on a lot of the things that I think are really important about Stoic philosophy, right? Some of it is going to be, I think, easier for the modern mind to digest, right? I think that, modern people might be more sympathetic with like the idea from nature that people are meant to work together, like they say in your translation there, like hands and feet, or like the top teeth and the bottom teeth, how they fit together, how they work together in a natural way.
Yeah.
Right? That's something that I can very easily sympathize with in terms of like my own life and stuff like that, right? Like that's something that is pretty easy for me to accept. It's also like, I think that what he's trying to draw out here, like with the parts about, they can't hurt me and I can't hurt them because we're all part of the same thing. This is where we're going to get into this idea of like, you can call it whatever you want, right? Like he calls it the soul. You can call it like collective human consciousness, or that like we're all one thing, right? I think it's important to not get hung up on the historical kind of things that have happened to the word soul, right? And maybe like on a deeper level, just try to accept some of those things. What do you think about all that? I said a lot of stuff. What do you make of that?
I have never really had a good concept of what a soul is. So I mean, in a way, I'm open to whatever concept is gonna be. But I wonder in this context if maybe they're not talking about like some kind of sort of soul aether, where kind of like that piece of soul that everybody has comes from, and where that ideal self that they're supposed to have is reflected. I don't know, like a kind of a more grander kind of aether concept. I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like that. The word that you use is not like, I guess, as important as the concept that he's trying to get across. In my translation, it's called a share of the divine. That's the word that they use. Okay,
that's a good way to say it. Yeah, that's much shorter than how I said it.
Yeah, but I think it's good to have both, yeah.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
Yeah. Yes, sir. All right. Well, that's everything that we need to say about souls and and all of that for now. But we'll dig a little deeper. Let's move on to another quote that I really liked here, and you can jump in with anyone. Actually, do you want to take this one too? I'll give you both. You had the first. You can have the second one too.
You want me to do the second one as well? Okay. Jeep. This, whatever it is that I am, is flesh and vital spirit and the governing self. Disdain the flesh, blood and bones and network. a twisted skein of nerves, veins, arteries. Consider also what the vital spirit is, a current of air, not even continuously the same, but every hour being expelled and sucked in again. There is then a third part, the governing self. Put away your books, be distracted no longer. They are not your portion. Rather, as if on the point of death, reflect like this. You are an old man. Suffer this governing part of you no longer to be in bondage. No longer to be a puppet pulled by selfish impulse. No longer to be indignant with what is allotted in the present, or to suspect what is allotted in the future.
Mm-hmm. So, quite a few things there. The first, I think, is like very akin to, like, my experience of something like this is like a meditation practice. Like, there's a meditation, and I'm not sure if this comes from like more of like the Buddhist tradition or yogic tradition or, you know, whatever kind of like modern spiritual tradition that like meditation techniques have come to me on YouTube or through a podcast or something like that. But the idea that you like sit there and really meditate on like how gross like your body is, right? That you're just like a mess of flesh and meat, and like you're just a kind of dead collection of cells in a way that like constantly are like dying and refreshing and stuff like that. But just like reflecting on how like disgusting everybody is as a human, and how that is meant to like actually help you because you accept it, right? You accept that like you're going to die in a way that like what it kind of even says there, right, is that you're already dead. Like, think about yourself like that, and that's meant to free you. Like, does that resonate with you, or is it like a repulsive idea to you?
So it doesn't repulse me. It doesn't resonate with me either, although I do think it's an interesting meditation technique. And I've never heard it before, but for me, there is an element of curiosity about death, and sort of this idea that when I arrive there, I'll probably have had a fairly long life, and whatever my fate is, my fate is. I'm very acceptant of it, and even a little bit eager because of the curiosity. And so there's no issues with accepting it and needing to meditate on the grossness of my body. Trust me, nobody is more of an expert on the grossness of my body than I am.
Yeah, I think a lot of comedy could be condensed to like a meditation on the grossness of bodies.
I think I heard a theory once that almost all comedy is driven by kind of the fear or morbid curiosity about mortality. That the desire to laugh is rooted in the fear of death.
I was just going to say eating ass.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, no, that's fun too.
Yeah, no,
always
like, it's
wash.
fun, but it's a lot of, it's the topic of a lot of comedy is what I meant. Anyways, yeah. But I want to focus on the last part here, right? Stop allowing your mind. It's in my translation, right? It says, stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked around by selfish impulses, to kick against fate and the present, and to mistrust the future, right? That's all equally there in your translation.
Yeah.
It's so short. Like this sentence, right? There's so much meaning packed into this to me. There's so much wisdom here. Like, you could read just that, like this. You could just take. That's why people like this book. That's what justifies this podcast. Stuff like this, right? This is like, it's profound. You could just go back to this phrase over and over again in your life, and I think that it would just like help you all the time. Like, not allowing.
I think that.
Yeah.
I think that touches on one of the reasons that this book has been so successful for so long. It is a short series of disconnected, very quotable essentially they were reminders for Marcus Aurelius for how to live a good life. And because of that, for anybody reading them, they become that same thing too. It's extremely relatable, it's extremely quotable, and that touches on really the very deep and resounding success that this has had for at least about 1,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also, like, because he had such an intense life, right? And you can say, like, oh, it was a great life. He was the emperor, he was rich as fuck, and all of this stuff, right? But
I would not say that.
Yeah.
I would not say that. Yeah. Being a Roman emperor wasn't fun. For the most part, it wasn't the kind of job where you sat around lavishly partying and eating fancy foods. For the most part, it was extremely stressful. It aged men, and they did not live long when they were in the job, typically.
Damn. Yeah. And yet everybody wanted to be that, right? It's almost like like some of the stuff that people aspire to today. Like everybody, like for instance, everybody wants to be famous, right?
Yeah.
But like how you could probably count the amount of like happy and like incredibly famous, like top level, you know, they know your name. Like in the States, they know your name. In Europe, they know your name. In Saudi Arabia, they know your name like everywhere, right? Australia, like that level of famous. How many of those people are deeply happy people? Maybe some, man. But
that's hard to say in a culture where it's become so important to project that we're living our ideal life. Like in the social media culture, how do you know who's really happy and who's not?
Well, you can tell that Tom Cruise has a bunch of weird shit going on.
So that's fair. I mean, some people wear their hearts on their sleeves, I guess.
But yeah, something to think about. All right, let's do this one. From my translation. But is yours in sections, by the way?
Mine is in sections, yeah.
Okay, so this is good. From section 4. There is a limit to the time assigned to you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and it will never return. So that one's good to dig into a bit, right? Obviously, there's a limit to the time assigned to you. Everybody knows that. Every human is aware that we are going to one day die, right?
What?
Sorry to the one person listening to this podcast who didn't know that. Imagine we're the ones that break it to someone. We're
gonna get sued.
Yeah. Can you sue someone for that? I don't know. Santa Claus isn't real and you are going to die, right?
Hopefully no kids are listening, although they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, I don't know if they should or not. I guess we talk about sex and say swear words.
I mentioned erotic pottery. I don't know. Yeah.
Careful, you might end up on like conservative talk radio or something like that if they find out about your what you've been doing here with erotic pottery. It's going to be all over the place.
Does it pay?
No, I mean that they're going to shame you and
okay.
Yeah, for some reason say that you're corrupting the children with your erotic pottery or something like that. Anyways, there is a limit to the time assigned to you, right? We know that. If you do not use it to free yourself, it will be gone and it will never return. So what does it mean to like free yourself, right? Let's discuss that for a minute. Like what do you think that means? And what does Marcus Aurelius think that means? Let me ask a more specific question.
That's a really hard question. This is where I struggled a little bit. I guess he thinks it. I guess for him it means like to free yourself from your like emotions. Mm-hmm. That's really all I've got. There's really nothing deeper.
Yeah, free yourself from your emotions. Like, it's obviously like a Stoic thing. I think also like free yourself from the fear of death. I think that's in there. And also perhaps like free yourself from other people's opinion of you. And maybe also like free yourself from some of your own actions in a way, right? I feel like as the emperor, like he had to do a lot of things that he didn't want to as you were saying, right? He had to do a lot of things that he didn't want to necessarily do because it was like his duty, or it was expected, or it was somehow right according to like what was needed in the world that he lived in, but not right in terms of like his own personal moral philosophy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that's like one of the deeper meanings of, use the time that you have to free yourself, right? Maybe it's also free yourself from guilt. One of the deeper readings to me anyways.
That could definitely be right. There's a lot of acts that Marcus Aurelius took during his reign that would have been questionable at best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's somewhere in there in the subtext. For me, another thing that came up though is just like, as we've been reading and studying this stuff, right? Free yourself from like the state, the power that the state has over you and over your thoughts. I think that that's like another thing. And like the power that society itself has over you and over your thoughts.
That one is one where I think coming from him, a lot of people would have been like, that's kind of rich. It's easy for him to say free yourself from the state. I mean, it looks, being the emperor looks hard to us, but I'm sure somebody at the very bottom of the ladder would have thought, yeah, well, that's easy for him to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to think about, but also like when you realize that like Stoic philosophy is a way of like freeing your mind, a way of realizing that what like you truly have control over is like your own mind, your own perception, your own like reaction to things, right? I think that does start to, you start to like compare that to the state's power and like society's power to do that to you, right? Like to assign you a worldview or assign you beliefs. And you feel like how impotent they truly are, right? If you're truly like dedicated to your own like moral philosophy, try as they may, like the state, society, social pressure, like can influence you. You're truly free from all of that, right? Like in a like spiritual and philosophical sense, but also like in reality. Right? Does that make sense to you?
Yes. I mean, to me that's I guess that you can be free from all that as long as you're willing to detach yourself from everything. That seems to be what it is, I guess, right?
Yeah, in a way, I guess that's one of the implications, yeah. And isn't that like a freedom too, right?
Yeah, I guess so. It's not always great for motivation for participation in the world, but
yeah, maybe. Maybe that just says like, yeah, just like don't.
It's like if life is an illusion, then why should I do anything? Fuck it.
Yeah. Just sit around and like think about thinking all the time, or even like less than that. I guess like sit around and meditate all the time, but that's kind of nice, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Anyways, the next one here, because we could talk about this like collection of words, these like 25 words right here, for a long time. But let's move on to the next one. So in my translation in section 11, if there were anything harmful on the other side of death, the gods would have made sure the ability to avoid it was within you. So what do you think about that?
It's an interesting idea. I wonder what it was based in his mind. Like what would be his reasoning for saying that?
Definitely that thing of what would be his reasoning for saying that?
Like, how does he know there's not a hell?
Right. He doesn't, I guess.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I think when I read that sentence. I'm like, that's a really nice idea. But, like, how does he know that?
Well, I guess it's just kind of like if you believe that, like, nature is the supreme good, right? Like, if you accept that thing, that, like, anything that is natural can't be evil.
I think I'm treating this as scientific when it's not meant to be.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not supposed to be scientific. It's more of a moral statement, right? So
yeah, I think that sounds really nice.
But you said yourself that you don't fear death.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that you find that there is nothing evil on the other side of death?
I mean, personally, I believe there's nothing on the other side of death. So there's nothing, neither evil nor good. It's just, in my mind, I imagine eternal nothingness.
Which isn't something that you're afraid of.
No, not at all. That's quite an appealing concept. Like, when you spend your life with this, like, racing mind and all sorts of things going on in it, no, the idea of eternal nothingness sounds really relaxing. Like a really long trip to the spa.
Yeah, I look at it differently for sure. I don't think that... I get the idea from Marcus Aurelius that he kind of agrees with me more, that you don't need to be afraid of death because it's all like one thing, right? That everything is like connected. So you as like one individual person, Jared Poirier, like it's not that like when you stop existing, when you die, that everything is going to stop existing. Do you know what I mean? Like you're just part of a continuum of like matter and energy and whatever, right? Yeah, so let's get into the next bit here. A quote that maybe some of our listeners have heard before, and maybe they've even had a chance to ponder on this a bit, but I would be super interested to hear your point of view, what you have to say about it. Life is warfare and a journey far from home. How does that appear in your translation? Just, I'm curious.
His life a warfare and a sojourn in a strange land.
Yeah, it means the same thing.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Do you want to go first? Like, what does that mean to you? And I'll go second.
I mean, there's the literal nature of it, where he spent 11 or 12 straight years at war in one place, which was not his home. If there's a deeper meaning to it, I guess it has something to do with the soul, and being kind of disconnected.
Yeah, you do get like a spiritual thing from it as well, right?
Yeah, I'm not clear on what it is exactly, but there seems to be something involved, yeah.
Well, you don't... I think that this one is... That's interesting that you say that, because I think that this one is kind of unique of the quotes that we've, pulled out here. you don't necessarily have to take like a spiritual point of view on this one. You can if you want. But like life is warfare. That's pretty much on its face. Like if you would live on the earth, you will at one time or another like experience war. Maybe not directly. Maybe you won't be a soldier in the field getting shot at, right? But you will most certainly experience wartime propaganda.
That is a fair point, I guess. I feel we live in North America, so we're pretty disconnected from war. You know, like we've heard about them, we've seen them on TV, but we've never actually seen one here, you know? So the idea of life being literal warfare doesn't fully resonate. Yeah, not in our lifetime, rather. When I say we've never seen one, I mean we've never seen one. So it doesn't fully resonate with me in that sense. Maybe the idea that life is a struggle, it can resonate that way.
In terms of your own like thoughts, though, you don't think about war a lot?
So, like, I think about it in that sometimes it's involved in, say, the games that I play. I study it as an academic interest, but I don't spend, like, when I'm out in my day cooking meals, I'm not being like, oh my god, war, there's people bombing each other. It's not really a part of my general thought. It doesn't occupy my attention when I'm doing other things.
Oh my god, you're lucky, man. You are.
Why, you're just like going around about your day thinking about the fact that there's wars?
Yeah.
Dude, there's always wars. There's always been wars. There's always going to be wars. Big deal.
Yeah, big deal, I guess, but I don't know. It like I'm preoccupied about it. I don't think that it's like I think that mankind like has the ability to transcend the state of war and like the concept of war. I think that like we could not war.
That sounds wonderful. Have you ever heard of the locus of control?
No.
The locus of control is what is inside your ability to control and what is outside your ability to control. Mm-hmm. Now, if you can control a thing, it's worth thinking about. But if you can't, is it?
I mean, I've heard of that concept. I haven't heard it called the locus of control before.
The locus of control are the things that you're able to control. Those are the things that are within your sphere of control. That's your locus.
Yeah.
Those are the things worth worrying about, right? That's the idea.
And somehow, like, like the occurrence of war in the world as like a phenomenon is not something that I have control over, so it's not something that I should worry about.
No, live your life.
Yeah, I guess maybe is that like maybe what Marcus Aurelius is saying. I don't know. Anyway,
maybe so. Yeah. What would Marcus say that your preoccupation with war in the world was stoic? Would he say it was natural? Because what you're doing is, and let me find his words here. What was it we said? Basically, you're upset with the goings on in the world, but if all things are natural, then everything that happens is natural. If nothing is good and nothing is bad and all things are natural, then war is natural.
Well, this doesn't say...
in terms of Stoicism.
Nothing in this chapter like says that anything that happens is natural and therefore good.
No evil is... For this is according to nature, and no evil is according to nature. Nature doesn't do evil.
Yeah, dying is according to nature, but that doesn't mean that, like, there's nothing that people can do that is not evil. Like, he talks about people being insidious, people being... people rejecting good, right? And, like, having no idea of, like, the conception of good and evil. He's definitely not saying that, there is no such thing as good and evil.
Well, and see, this is where we see conflicts, right? Because, like, he literally does say that, like, nature makes... I would have to pick it apart again, but doesn't he basically say nature makes all things and anything nature makes can't be bad? While at the same time talking about people being evil.
Yeah, we can dig into that more, right? I think that you're right that the idea of like going around and being preoccupied about like injustices in the world is not very Stoic. I would agree with that. And I would also say that like it also doesn't really help that much, like being worried about it. But like to the extent that you can help like the victims of war, or like try to mitigate the like effects of war in a way that you actually do have control over, I think that that is good and something that like you should do. But should you go around and like worry about it the way that I do? No, probably not. And is that going to solve the problem? No, I agree with you. It probably won't. So maybe you've just
and it won't make you feel better.
Maybe you've just freed me from that, and so has this podcast, but we'll see. A journey far from home. Oh my God. We talked about like this is going to be a long podcast, guys. Settle in. This might be, oh God. Do we make this
We're at about an hour now.
Do we make this we can't make it a two-parter. Okay. Well, it's going to be a long part. It's going to be a long episode, guys. Settle in.
Well, we're on the last section. Oh yeah, we have things to talk about.
Yeah, we have stuff. A journey far from home, right? From the, spiritual perspective, like you were saying, right? Like if you believe that you're like a soul on an earthly journey or something like that, then that could be like talking about that, right? But it could just mean like in terms of like temporal reality. There's this phrase that, a more modern phrase, you can never go home again. The idea that like, because things are like constantly evolving, constantly changing, your whole entire life is like, you take it for granted, like these situations, like hanging out at your grandma's house and like spending time with your family and stuff like that. You might be like preoccupied with other things. Yeah.
Kind of like home wasn't just a place, it was a place and a time. And you can't go back to that. Yeah, and yet that's you
did all these things that we talked about earlier. You kicked against the present, all of that stuff, right? You were jerked around by selfish impulses, kicked against fate and the present. You mistrusted the future.
It reminds me of something somebody said once that really stuck with me, which was, you can live in the past, but there's nobody there with you.
Yeah. That's true, man. Damn. Yeah. If you actually like think about the implication of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of that, does like come through in a powerful way to tell you like, live in the moment. Like this whole section has, probably this entire episode, right, which is going to end up being 2 hours long. Let's just accept it. It's going to come back around to live in the moment, but why live in the moment? Well, because life is warfare and a journey far from home, right? Like all of these reasons that you can really think about. You can't ever go back and get that moment back. And you didn't even enjoy it.
And this is where you are. No matter how much you think about something or being somewhere else, this is where you are. So you might as well be here.
Yeah. Yeah, like fuck. Anyways, let's enjoy the present moment here, Devin, and let's talk about let's go back to talking about the soul a little bit. As it is referred to in my translation, we talked about it earlier, a share of the divine, right? Is this an idea that like people can accept in like the modern secular post-God Nietzschean world, right? Is this something that people can, all of you nihilists, can you accept this idea?
If we trust the numbers about where public beliefs are going, they're tending more towards open spiritualism than true atheism, which I think means that it's extremely compatible with modern life.
Yeah.
Even as an atheist, I am willing to accept that there might be planes of existence of which I am not aware. I mean, the universe is massive and we're just this tiny part of it. And so there's probably something out there that I'm not aware of. It's just not something I concern myself with, right? So I think it's easy, if you're willing to be humble as an atheist, to say, yeah, sure, there's just probably a kind of a sharing of the souls. What was the words you used?
That each person possesses a share of the divine.
There it is.
Yeah. Pretty profound. Some stuff that I think, like, if you want, that's what, you and I might say about it, right? Marcus Aurelius himself, it seems that, like, the soul, he does, in my translation, say the soul is, like, a part of God. Right? Is that what the soul means, right? Is the soul a part of God? Is it like, if each person possesses a share of the divine, right? That means that, like, each person is a part of God, I guess, in a sense. Maybe. I think I kind of read it that way. Or is it like kind of the vessel that you use? Is your soul like the phone that you call up God with? Is it how you, like, communicate with God? If you didn't have a soul, you couldn't communicate with God. That's maybe another way to look at it, right? One thing I think that comes through very, very strongly is that, like, your soul is immortal. It's not something that, like, it's not like you were born and your soul started existing and then you die and your soul dies, right? It's maybe that it, like, continues in some way. Maybe it goes into, like, another person, or just, like, is reabsorbed and reflected in something else. I think that like comes through in the text. And that another thing is that your soul is perfect. I think that comes through in the text very strongly. Here in section 13, all you have to do is be attentive to the power inside you and worship it sincerely, right? This idea that, like, your soul is something perfect. You've already been gifted by just, like, nature itself, or by God, whatever you want to call it, with something perfect, and that is your soul. So it's not that you have to, like, decide what it is to be good. It's that, like, goodliness itself is an eternal concept, and all you have to do is embrace it. It's, like, easier than defining your own, like, idea of the right. Is that something that, like, is easily accepted to you, or something that, like, you push back on?
I pretty far into the side of relativism. I can see how that would be a pretty straightforward and easy philosophy for most people. It doesn't really fully resonate with me entirely, but I get the idea.
You get the idea. What do you mean?
I mean, I kind of understand that concept that that kind of locked away inside the soul is that kind of, like, deeper morality of things. But I also don't necessarily believe in, like, a whole lot of objective morality, and that's also kind of in conflict with kind of the idea that you got to be okay with everything. It's an odd system of you got to be ready to be okay with everything, and then, oh yeah, look at all these bad things.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, we'll have to reconcile that at some point, I think. So I'm glad. I'm glad that you brought that up. One way that I think is a good kind of reference point for explaining this type of thing, and even, like, you and I might, like, label ourselves. I don't know. I don't want to put a label on you, and I don't want to put a label on me, but I think this is maybe, like, pretty close to, like, what we actually think in terms of, like, accepted schools of philosophy. I would say that I'm more of, like, a Platonic idealist, that I do believe that there is, like, and tell me if I'm wrong, right? Tell me if I'm wrong about, like, this classification. That I, like, truly believe that there is, like, an eternal sense of good that exists, right? And it isn't just defined by, like, one person or another, right? I would say that you, and this is, like, hilarious, hilarious to say in these words in a podcast. I would say that you, Devin, are more of a Nietzschean optimistic nihilist. Someone who's
accurate.
Yeah. Someone who says that, there is no inherent meaning, right? And you create your own inherent meaning. Or
have you heard of Albert
meaning,
Camus?
You create your own meaning in general. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of Albert Camus?
No, is he like a philosopher or something?
Yeah, he's a French philosopher. He's like kind of absurdist. Life has no meaning, so therefore do crazy shit and be wild kind of thing. It's like, Nietzschean positive nihilism mixed with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go. And he's like into like debauchery in that? Is that what he's like a
not necessarily debauchery,
just worshiper?
No, more in the realm of absurdism. Just be weird.
Oh, okay.
Do whatever,
All
have
right.
fun,
All right.
It wasn't necessarily about let's get fucked up and party. But
no.
That's a whole other branch of philosophy.
Well, the fact that I went exactly right to there might be say something about me. Anyways.
That's why I like you.
I think another good way of kind of grounding all of this, or maybe a good way of thinking about it, is to go back to Plato, right? Plato's theory of forms, which didn't really make that much sense to me personally until I got this like kind of analogy that Greek stonemasons would use a wooden form when they're creating like a column or like part of a building or whatever, right? It was like something made out of wood that like the master, like a mold, right? That the master would lend you. You could like measure it out and go ahead and replicate it, right? So this is kind of
like an analogy for DNA to me.
Yeah, that would be like the scientific kind of way of explaining it. Or like a blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Or like the codes that you put into a 3D printer or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is kind of the like Platonic idealism, right? That you have like an ideal version of something. And let's say that you want to like build a car, right? You shouldn't just think like, what type of car are we going to build like from nowhere? You should think like, what is the transcendent ideal of a car that we can pull from the ether and manifest in reality?
Ooh, I'm kind of on the fence between a German and Italian car here. I'll have to think about it and get back to you, but...
Which one is more of like the pure ideal of ethereal car?
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I like this idea. Like this really excites me a lot, and I think it applies to so many things. Plato himself would apply this to the government itself, right? In Plato's Republic, right? Like instead of thinking, oh well, considering all of these things, what type of government should we have? It's like, no. What is the ideal government? It's like a good way of building things, I feel. Like whether they be physical objects or organizations or like what have you.
As long as it's an adaptive strategy in the moment rather than a rigid idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't know if this philosophy has a specific idea of what perfect government is, or if it's more of an in-the-moment objective analysis of what we would need in a government right now,
Yeah, like, but if you want the best government for right now, if your like starting point is like accepting all of these things, X, Y, and Z conditions, because of this, we need to have a government that does that. Maybe like say, fuck all that and go from like, just the simplest point of view, like what would an ideal government be, and realize that all of those conditions maybe aren't as real as we make them, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet.
I mean, I don't make a whole lot of sense a lot of the times, so I mean, I could be the wrong person to ask, but time will tell.
Well, like, do you think that governments should literally seek like good, or should they just seek like the best that we can do considering the circumstances?
What is good?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
What is good?
What is good?
Governments can only do what's objectifiable and quantifiable, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't elect somebody and then say, "Okay, Prime Minister, your job is do good."
Yeah, the optimal.
You must do good. You know, we have to set real, tangible targets when it comes to government.
Right. Marcus Aurelius says that it's the optimal welfare of the people, some kind of phrase like this.
And then again, that comes down to the question of what is that? Is the optimal welfare now, or is it 10 years down the line? When we're talking about people, are we talking about the average people or the people in charge? You know what I mean? Like, there's all these questions when it comes to government.
Yeah, politics is a complicated ass thing, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's idea of what good is different. So if I put you in charge, your idea of doing good or creating an ideal government, and then I put me in charge, those two end states would be different.
Mm-hmm. And
because we have very different ideas about what's right to do.
Yeah, and even if you say, well, what is good is what's in accordance with nature, that's still pretty open-ended, right? In a way. So,
yeah, I mean, you know, nature's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And if you say, you know, well, then murdering and everything else is in accordance with nature, yeah, it can be very tricky. So maybe that's like that's a good lead into our, you know, next subaltimate. There you go. We use big words on the podcast. The subaltimate category here, other than giving you homework. Let's get into some questions and critiques here. So I'm very interested that you didn't. I expected you to be like more resistant to some of the more like metaphysical ideas that are present in this chapter, and you weren't that much. I expected more of this, like this kind of thing to be like a debate, which you didn't let. I wouldn't say you let me down, but you know.
I was trying to have an open mind about it. I think if anything, what you were seeing was less of me kind of just like accepting everything and a little bit more of like kind of a Tucker Carlson-esque not understanding what's going on at all. Just like a
okay.
Basically. I think that if we're talking about in terms of me and my life, there's a lot of the metaphysical things that I do and would push back against. But if we're talking about examining this from the perspective of a Stoic, from the perspective of Marcus Aurelius, then I'm willing to entertain these ideas in my head. And I'm not so insecure in my own beliefs about the world that I can't take these ideas into my head, turn them over and look at them and think them and feel them and then put them away later. I'm comfortable in how I feel and what I think.
Mm-hmm. So maybe let me put this to you a different way. Like Stoic philosophy, right? Or even like more specifically, like what is in this book, like the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, right? The fact that it seems to rely on underpinnings of, you know, this idea of like the soul, of like the gods, of fate, right? These like metaphysical concepts. Is that like a weakness of the work if you're going to use that to say like, this is a guide for how you should live your life?
In my opinion, yes. Because it's not objective. These are things that are subjective, that can't be proven, and that could be anything to any person. However, from the point of view of a lot of people, I don't think it would be. I think that the more common view would be that the reliance on the metaphysical is perfectly fine, because that's okay with a lot of people. From the point of view of somebody trying to argue it or share the idea, it's highly beneficial because it can't be disproven.
It also depends on your worldview, right? And what you think the word real means.
That's a really good point. For me, real means existing in the physical world. Something I can see and touch.
Okay, so let's just go back to the soul, right? Is the soul real? A tomato is real because you can put it there on a platter and you can say, like, this is a tomato, and you can touch it, you can pick it up, you can smell it, you could throw it against the wall and it would smash. It interacts with like the physical world, all of this shit, right? A tomato is real. But people's belief that they have a soul, or people's belief in God, it causes them to live their life in a different way. It might cause you to like go and take out your neighbor's trash. It might cause you to, like comfort someone who needs comforting. It might like cause you to just like go and clean your neighbor's driveway of the leaves, right? It might also cause you to like invade their country and kill like all of their population. But it affects the real world. Right?
Yes. That makes what people think and feel about it real. That doesn't make the thing itself real. Although it is an abstract concept that has very, very real consequences. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I think like one of the strongest arguments, like not that I'm trying to like berate you and be like I'm not trying to be like the lawyer for spiritualism or anything here. But I would just say that like if like the majority of people who have ever existed think that it's real, is it not real? Like, are all those people just...
It's definitely perceived as being real, but seeing and believing are both often wrong.
So all those people, like, who believe in God throughout the ages, like, are just all delusional?
I didn't say they're delusional, but there's a difference between what they believe and what objective reality is. And I don't mean that to mean that their God isn't somewhere. I just mean that he's not here in the physical world with us, in which case I don't care.
You don't go in the in the woods and like see God or whatever.
Yeah, God's not in the woods. You know, you might feel him. He might create a feeling, but he's not physically there. Mm-hmm. He can't be touched. He can't be measured.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Except in effect.
I could be wrong.
Except in effect. And he can be like, or he, whatever, God like can definitely be felt. Like God is a phenomenon that people experience. Anyways, we can debate that. Humanity is the history of people debating that, Devin.
Yeah, and I mean, so my argument is that the effect you're talking about is an effect that comes from actions people take due to their feelings about God. But God didn't do those things. Those people did those things.
No, I just mean that you can like feel the presence of God. Like I am feeling it right now.
That's not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
I'll have to take your word for it.
Yeah, which is fair. Anyways, we're probably not going to solve that problem in this podcast.
No.
So yeah, but this thing I think is interesting. This comes out in both translations. Discard your thirst for books. I'm not sure exactly how that is phrased in yours, but I did hear it come out. What's up with that, man? Isn't Marcus Aurelius saying like be a philosopher, read books? He wrote this shit in a book.
It's really odd for somebody who was famously bookish. And so again, right? I think it's important to remember that these are a series of disconnected reminders for Marcus Aurelius. And we might be able to look at that one in a more literal sense of like, let go of the idea that you're going to be able to go back to your libraries in Rome. You're on the frontier now. Right? There could be a little bit of that in it. It could be maybe in a spiritual sense, like the idea of letting go of specific beliefs and being just more open to a general open spirituality. I don't know.
Well, that rings true to me in a way that, like, I didn't consider myself and never would have. Like, without talking to you about it, I never would have considered that what he's saying is that because of his life, because of his responsibilities as the emperor, right? Life is warfare.
Yeah, I'm never going back to my books.
That he was like, yeah, part of it is like living in the moment, appreciating the moment, appreciating like what has been dealt to you in life, right? That he was like, man, I wish I was just reading some books right now, right? It's maybe something that like we have a hard time. Like, I like reading books, but I'm not often like, oh, I'm at work right now, I could be at home with my books. For some of us, it's like I could be watching a movie, I could be drinking beer, I could be having sex, right? Like,
could be with friends, any of those things.
Exactly, right? So yeah. And that's about as like deep as I think we could get in it. We could have other interpretations of that, but I like that a lot. So yeah, another thing that I want to kind of maybe not critique, but just kind of dig a little bit deeper on. Marcus Aurelius talks a lot about like this idea of life being a test. And I kind of want to figure out, like, in terms of like the metaphysical thing or like the spiritual thing, like what is life a test for? If it's a test, like, is it valid in and of itself? If the day-to-day shit that you come up against, your taxes, the government's going to war, your, whatever policy that you don't like in regards to like gay people or women's rights or whatever, right? If all of these things are like meant to test you and like in a sense like make you stronger or whatever, like what is like if life is a test, it's a test for what? So what do you think that he means? Like, what is...
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what people have been debating about religion all this time, is what comes after death. I think that it's hard to conceive what their idea of a soul entirely was. When I think about it, I imagine you're born and an ocean becomes a drop. And you die and that drop becomes an ocean again. When you think of it that way, then I think that maybe the test is for your rejoining of the ocean. Maybe.
Like, what do you mean? Like a test for
when you die, your soul's got to go back to where it came from, right?
Like, and do you deserve to rejoin the ocean?
It doesn't seem to come up at all, whether or not you deserve it mattering.
Yeah, it almost like, this whole idea that like everything's in accordance with nature, and that, is kind of saying like none of it matters. You're going to be part of like the continuum of existence, whether you're evil or not, whether you're good or not. So then, like, what is the point of being good, right?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's hard to really say, man. And maybe you can go back to that Greek thing and like what, if you're good, then you're gonna, I don't know, doesn't everyone go to the underworld anyways?
Yeah, everybody goes to the underworld anyways, and I mean, it's not much different for one person or another.
Yeah.
As time went on, that changed for Romans especially, but not really Greeks. Romans eventually developed specific levels of hell very similar to what Dante imagined.
Yeah, just like so many people, even like, the most what like is most like ever present in our minds just because of like where we grew up, right? Like where we live and like the historical part that we're in is like Christianity. And that idea of like, if you're good, then you're going to have like a better station. Like God is going to say, wow, good job. And you're going to get like a more fucking pancakes in heaven or whatever.
No, that was not the case for the Romans.
No. So
we're all going to the same shitty place.
Yeah. Yeah. For the Romans are also like the, you know, Platonics or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. Interesting, man. Definitely one to ponder on as we go forward in this podcast. Like, what is the point of like being good? Yeah.
You know, I have to wonder if this isn't a reflection of kind of a difference between the beliefs of the upper class of Rome and what their religion told them. Very similar to Christianity and before it really took root.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe there was syncretism between what the Romans already believed that was in conflict with their religion and incoming Christianity.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe something of like reincarnation here too.
Maybe. I didn't get that from it at all, but you could be right.
Well, if like that thing of, you know, any adversity, what does he say? Marcus Aurelius, the impediment becomes the way. The idea that like any adversity is just like making you stronger and preparing you for like what's next. That could mean like what's next in this life, but also what's next in like the next life or whatever. Right?
Yeah. I'm not sure that the Romans had much of a concept of
reincarnation. It's there in like Greek
reincarnation. Yeah,
it's there in Greek philosophy. It's there in like
it is okay.
Plato, Aristotle, like Stoic philosophers. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So maybe something to, or you know, according to like whoever's interpretation of Greek.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, this one too. I want to touch on, but again, my expectations were subverted a bit in a way because I thought that this was going to be like a real profound fucking question to put near the end of the podcast, but not really. We've already kind of like identified this and like kind of, I don't know, like uprooted this point and burned it.
Yeah.
How can the richest, most powerful man in the world somehow not be free? We view that this idea of like being powerful, being well known, just like high social status, and we all want it so badly. We all thirst for it, like lust for it. Right? To be powerful, like to be the emperor of Rome, right? The most powerful man.
We can
in the
become
world.
slaves. Sorry.
Yeah, go.
We can become slaves to our roles. Right? Marcus Aurelius had a job to do. And doing that job in the best way possible, obviously kind of involved a little bit of sacrifice of time and of his own principles. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of probably the way that the richest, most powerful man in the world wasn't free.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were a lot of freedoms that went along with being the Roman emperor that Marcus Aurelius did not avail himself of. Because he was a Stoic, most likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's less of a problem with like reality itself and more of a problem of like our preconception and perhaps even like how we've been like, maybe that's just like social pressure or like social indoctrination to believe that like being rich and powerful is somehow going to make you more free. No, it's not.
I think it's hopeful projection.
It's going to make your life worse. Most likely, right?
I mean, if anything, what we're seeing, I think, and I mean, this is just personal, a theory, but I think the modern mental health crisis is maybe a reflection that as we go up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we end up having more time to think about some of the less straightforward things in our life that we're not happy about. As soon as we're well fed and well clothed and sheltered and we have all our water, all of a sudden now there's time for us to think about the things that we might be sad about, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's just a pet theory.
Yeah. And you have more experience with this than me. And, you know, this is something that I definitely want to do a little bit more in my own personal life. Like, go and like live more of that like survivalist type of thing. Like, go hunting and go and just like live in a cabin. And the times that I've done stuff like this, not that I've ever been like that hardcore, right? But I've gone on some camping trips and stuff like that. You do start to notice like, this is what I should be doing. And like, this is what is great. Like, you don't have like, when you're just satisfied because you have like a warm fire and food in your stomach, you're not thinking about how many followers you have on Instagram.
No, or how many likes you got, or like even like what's happening at like work or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like when you're spending the day chopping wood to stay warm and, you know, hunting or building new stuff around your camp, you don't even have time to think about any of those things. They don't matter anymore.
They don't even exist.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're just kind of managing this physical world around you and trying to stay alive and do your thing.
Yeah. So maybe that's like what, you know, the Stoics are talking about when they say the natural thing is virtuous, right? Maybe that's what they're talking about a bit more. Like, and that idea of like living in accordance with nature. Like maybe we've kind of
misinterpreted.
Well, I'd say at the beginning we misinterpreted it, and like as we've spent our time like really thoughtfully kind of dissecting this and like looking into it on a deeper level, that maybe we understand it better, like what they mean by that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could mean both things, right? Like it could be a much more all-encompassing concept when they talk about nature.
Yeah, right. But I like, there's some points where I felt like my brain wasn't grasping it, and like just noticing that. Too. Yeah, talking about like this, especially this last part about like, you know, being incredibly wealthy and powerful, and it not actually making you like happier, but like more importantly, more free, right? Yeah. Interesting.
It raises an interesting question. If he's not free, is anybody free?
Yeah, you're free if you're free in your mind.
There you go. That's a wonderful answer. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we can get into the last section here. We've already kind of like blended these two together, I guess, in a way. But the thing that this philosophy podcast is supposed to be all about is like applying this stuff to your life, right? That's the point of doing this. That's the point of reading this and talking about it, and, you know, thinking about it and spending your precious time, because you're gonna die on this, right? Is so that we can apply it to our own lives and like learn how we can live better now, right? Some stuff that resonated most with me personally: don't spend your time thinking about the thoughts and desires of other people, or like what other people are what are they preoccupied with, and getting like mad because strangers on the internet feel a certain way about something. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, why would you ever worry about that? Go back to, again, you don't have to call it a soul, but just like your own personal, like your own mind, your own essence, your own being, right? Just work on that. Spend your time doing that. What can I improve in myself? Like, when have I treated another person unjustly, or just been like dismissive to somebody? When have I hurt someone in my family just because I wasn't thinking about what I was saying, or I wasn't being present in the moment? I was just, you know, trying to keep my brain occupied with something, and I said something stupid that like may have hurt someone that I care about, right? And if you spend all of your time thinking about, oh, like this thing is bad and this person's bad, this political party, this whatever, spend that energy perfecting yourself. And like you said, what is that? The
locus of control.
The locus of control. Do you have
fix what you can fix?
Yeah. Do you have control over like whatever random like person on the internet thinks? No. Do you have control over like whatever policy, whatever war is happening in the world? Like, quite frankly, like I accept it, Jared. Like you don't, right? Like you do not, right? Do you have control over like yourself, your own internal beliefs, and like the actions even that you take in life and the way that you treat people? Yeah. So maybe spend more time on that, right? Does that that kind of click with you as like maybe a reason why we should read this shit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great reason why we should read this stuff. Yeah. And it's kind of a very kind of true and universal statement if you think about it, you know? Mm-hmm. Everybody has their little piece of the world and their little piece of time. And we can't affect the things that are far away from us, and we can't affect the things that came before us. But we can affect the things that come after us in small ways, though.
Yeah,
and that's what matters most.
In a sense, like you're emperor of Rome of your own like life, your own like house, your own room, your own mind, your own heart.
Your own mind is the most important one, I think.
Yeah. And like this idea really like shines brightly through this, like as you read it. The idea that like in order to like avoid being kind of like aimlessly led from one thing to another, you really need like a guiding principle in your life, whatever that is. And that's maybe something to reflect on and like try to understand in yourself. I don't think I can say what my guiding philosophy in life is. Like that's maybe a big problem. I can say like
I think it might be a very common problem.
I can say some shit, right? Like I believe in nature. I believe in family. I believe that you should like try to be nice to people. These are all just like things you can say, right? Is any of that like a coherent guiding philosophy for my life? Probably not. So that's interesting. Maybe I am being just like led from place to place by my impulses. And then, you know, am I more than like a stupid animal? Am I more than like an amoeba or a guinea pig or whatever, just like shitting in one place and like eating in another, right?
Marcus Aurelius's deepest desire was to look deeper into the world and to understand it more profoundly. Mm-hmm. I think that the message inherent in that is that search for deeper meaning and for knowledge is in and of itself a worthy pursuit. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you seek deeper understanding and deeper meaning in the world, and that you're on this journey very obviously of trying to understand it in the less obvious and non-visual ways. I think that very journey is a deeper meaning that perfectly fits what's needed.
Like the pursuit of truth.
The pursuit of truth, I think, is a perfectly worthy philosophy for your life.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Aurelius would agree with me.
Yeah, I would agree with you too. Another thing, which I guess that I need to accept and embrace, don't get upset when things keep reoccurring.
Yeah.
That one's fucking hard, man. Really hard. Like, because they do. Boy, do they ever.
Oh, God, do they ever. Yeah. And that's when you feel like you're under personal attack, right?
Yeah. But to go to that idea of like strengthening you, right? when you like do like a physical exercise, like you pick up that barbell and you curl it and you curl it and you curl it and you curl it, you do the same thing over and over. You basically experience the same hardship, right? Over and over again. And that like builds your resilience, your strength. So that's maybe like the way to kind of, for me personally, like to try to accept that, right? Yeah.
And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, you know, life is like anything, you practice and you get better at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and experiencing diversity, like going through hardship is one of those things, I suppose, right? Like I can definitely speak to that in my own life, like because of like personal, business, like professional, whatever hardships that I've gone through. The next time that it happens, which it will happen again, it doesn't provoke me the same way. I don't even have a reaction. I used to get so angry or you know, all of these just get like even upset, just like emotionally disturbed, or like I guess experience anxiety, right? Start to like spiral and have like negative thought patterns that go like, oh, well, this happened and that means like that's going to lead to this and then I'm going to be dead. Someone left me a bad review on Google Maps, Devin. Oh, well, that's going to lead to this. My career is ruined. Like, and then this, I'm dead. You know, it's like,
that's
it's hilarious.
It's all over.
It's hilarious, right? So yeah. Just to try to accept that shit. This one here, from a certain perspective, like everybody experiences the same challenges. We're all going to die, right? Yeah, it's the quote at the end. So I'll save that for the end. But yeah. You all have the same ability to escape things in life which are harmful to you. And is death harmful to you? Really? That's what we have to think about, right? We'll get to that at the end of the episode. Need to respect and live in harmony with other people. This one is really hard, right? And not try to change them to be more like you. Like you were saying, if your view of morality is one thing and you want to just like kind of clone, I think everybody kind of has this like fantasy in their head, right? Have you ever experienced this fantasy? If everybody in the world just thought like me, the world would be a perfect place. Have you ever thought that?
Oh God, so much.
Do you think it's true, or do you think that the like diversity of belief and like the diversity of personalities, like the kind of like equilibrium that gets created there is actually what functions? Because like
honestly, when I think it out in a more extended form, I don't really think I want to deal with that much of people like me. But that is equal to my feeling of not wanting to deal with people now. So, I mean, it's a toss up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my view is kind of more like adjusting to that thing of like everyone's like own personality and like wants and the way that they act in the world kind of, you know, if it wasn't for like greedy people out there or, you know, just like nefarious people, maybe that wouldn't like inspire like goodness and, you know, charity and all of these things in others. Right. So that there like is like a balance there. That's or like
there's interesting implications to free will in that.
Yeah.
That good requires evil.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Interesting.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And then not attaching your identity and like your happiness, your like feelings of self-worth, your personality to things that are temporary, because let's be honest, like they are, right? Like your riches, your station in life, you know, life itself, power, pleasure, just like your bodily health even.
None of those things are you.
None of those things are you. Yeah. Good way to put it, man. Very good way to put it. Yeah. And there's no one who stays on top forever, man. Like, So if that's what you are, like if you're, I don't know, like a leading actor in films, right? The time's going to come when there's like a new guy. People aren't talking about Robert Redford anymore, right? Like your time will pass. And if you have like assigned all of your self-worth to that, yeah, it's basically just setting you up for suffering, right?
Using an actor is one metaphor, but some athletes hit peaks that don't look like they'll ever be touched.
Yeah, that's
Wayne
true.
Gretzky's records look like they'll never be broken.
Yeah.
He can safely attach his ego to that. Take that to the bank.
Yeah, and now he just makes shitty wine, so...
I think he makes other shitty wines, too.
Yeah, Wayne Gretzky, he definitely listens to this podcast, so...
Oh, yeah, he'll be so angry when he hears this.
Yeah, and I think, like, the most resounding thing, maybe, like, two very, like... I guess I don't want to say transcendent, but just like the most important things that are going to come out of this podcast, right? Number one, you need to live in the moment, and not just you should, but you need to decide for yourself why. Why is it like, I don't know, why is it good for you to live in the moment, right? In whatever way you want to think about that for yourself. Number two, don't be afraid of death, right? As I said earlier in the podcast, it's something that you, like, both of us have to laugh about it because, I don't know, as much as people say that they accept it, like, and I'll say, like, I accept and I don't fear death, there's also part of me that says, like, you're deluding yourself when you say that, right? That you don't fear death. Like, there's, like, I don't know, maybe some type of, like, cognitive dissonance. It maybe is something like the curse of all mankind that we all know that we're going to die, right? And maybe
I'll make an honest conceit,
yeah.
Okay? If it isn't my time, then I'll be perfectly comfortable running from death.
Mm-hmm.
When my time comes, I'll be ready.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to believe that in myself, but I don't know.
I don't have that cognitive dissonance. I believe that.
Yeah, good. That's nice for you, man. That must be very, like, comforting to live that way. Yeah, just accepting, like, that. I don't know. For me, I guess the thing that helps me accept it more is just that idea that, like, things are eternal. You never really die. You're just going to be, like, reconstituted in something else. Even, like, that point of DNA, right? Like, your DNA is just like the DNA of everything else that ever existed. Like, the history of all life on Earth has been, like, condensed into your DNA and then, like, kind of like, manifested into the world, right? So that you're never really going to die. You as, like, Jared Poirier, as Devin Kivioya, yes, you will die. I will die. But, like, we're part of something which is eternal that will never die.
Yeah.
So that's comforting. All right. You want to give people some homework?
Yeah. So, your homework this week will be to think of a problem you currently face in your own life and to examine how Platonic Idealism can help you solve it. What's the ideal version or the ideal situation in what you're dealing with? Think about it.
Think about that. Come back. Check us out next week. We're going to have another, hopefully, thought-provoking and just, like, necessary life-affirming podcast for you that will help you to live a more virtuous life and just be a happier person, because that is the goal after all. We hope. A quote for everybody here from Epictetus. I cannot escape death, but at least I can escape the fear of it.